Have you ever dreamed of having someone to do all the things you don't have time for, like work, exercise, and just enjoy life? Well, Jung Sang-woo, a college student, was almost living that dream, except his world was a bit chaotic due to the presence of monsters. He was always complaining about not having enough time to do the things he wanted, like work, play video games, go on trips, party, and even go on a date. That's why he wanted to be able to split himself in two. He then joined a program to awaken his abilities and was exposed to a large amount of mana. After proving his identity, he crossed through a portal that led him to a bunker, where he met the other people. There, he saw a girl awaken a power of fire and was quickly invited to a guild of hunters. When he checked his stats, he discovered his new ability, to create clones. Apparently, a number of clones he could create was limited depending on his level. After returning home, one of the people in charge didn't take into account his ability, thinking he could only create clones in an illusory form. As he was thinking of all the things he had to do, the young man decided to test his new power by creating his first clone. Apparently, his copy called him Master, which made the protagonist a bit uncomfortable. After dressing him, Jeong asked him some questions and gave him simple orders like sitting and standing up repeatedly. Here, he checked that his stats were equals to his. At that moment, he received a message from his friend asking him what power he got. Being distracted by that, Jeong didn't realize that his clone had increased his stamina. On the other hand, we meet Jumper, a Class S ranker who was one of the first people to conquer the daunting Audience Tower. Jumper was in his building when his assistant informed him that 80% of the world's population had already awakened their abilities, and in 5 years that number would reach 100%. This news made the boy a bit anxious. Returning to our protagonist, we see that he is doing a lot of exercises, to the point that he has lost weight and even grow a little taller, thanks to his ability. The pain that his clones suffer when performing their tasks won't affect the protagonist, as they simply disappear when damaged or reach their energy limit, although as a disadvantage the clone can't clone himself. However, Young makes the most of his ability, as he can increase his stats faster than anyone else. That's why, to increase his speed, he decides to send his clone to the gym. Later, the protagonist in need of money looks for a job, although for now he will have to do it himself, as the clone can't follow the process if he doesn't experience it before the original. When he calls the company, he is pleasantly surprised that they accept him so quickly. They even ask him if he can start that same day. Jung arrives at the company together with his clone, who is disguised to go unnoticed. In the place, they meet an acquaintance named Deokchil, who tells them what they should do. Deokchil approaches them to give them something to drink and to chat with Jung about the school. He tells him that his daughter is not very good at studying, so he offers him a job as a tutor. Seeing that the pay is decent and that the tasks are not too exhausting, the young man accepts, while the clone eats all his food. The next morning, Young was eating breakfast and checking his stats when he realized he didn't like his job as a delivery man. To get the statistics of regeneration, he sent for his clone and pricked his finger, a process that scared him a little. After giving his clone a phone, Young headed to the gym. On the way, he ran into an acquaintance named Kim, who was surprised to see Young was no longer the chubby guy he knew. Kim also mentions the gym had a beautiful trainer. When Young arrived, he signed up without hesitation, knowing his clone would come for him. After seeing how handsome the trainer was, Young asks to see her grades, which embarrassed her. He encouraged her by saying he didn't have good points in those exams either, but they'd make an effort to do well. Back home, Young wondered how to communicate with his clones since he couldn't get a cell phone for each one. He looked for an ability that could help him, but they were all too expensive. So, he decides to become a hunter to earn more money. In 2000, portals appeared and monsters came out, killing half of the human populations. Superhumans with special powers saved humanity, and in 2023, people with skills hunt the remaining monsters and are called hunters. To become one, they must pass a rigorous examination. Young went to the Hunter Exam Center, where he saw a lot of people. The supervisor explained the exam consisted of a practical written test and attitude, and they'd be disqualified if they cheated. We also saw Kang, the CEO of the guild, GM, who was going to the place where they did the Hunter's exams. Later, it turns out that Young passed the exam with ease as if he was getting a driver's license, which is a bit worrying since being a hunter is no small feat. As many guilds approached the future hunter, one of them was Kang, who gave him his card, but the young man had no time for that since his ability had risen to level 2 and he quickly went home. There, he discovered he could now make 2 clones. Calmer now, the protagonist talked to Kang, and the next day they met in the cafe. Kang asked about his ability and was surprised to discover it was cloning. The guy was a bit disappointed, thinking it was only the kind of power that made illusionary clones, something that was really quite useless, but as he needed new recruits, he suggested low-level jobs like hunting slimes. These weren't very dangerous, but when they were eliminated, they released toxic gases, so the protective gear was needed. The other thing was the House of the Rabbits with horns. At that moment, the CEO was surprised by the original Young. It turned out he was talking to a clone the whole time. At first, Kang thought they were twins, but when they realized that other hero's ability was unique, being able to raise his stats using his clones, so he saw great potential in the boy. They arranged to meet at the Hunter's Center. The days went by and the hero went there to duplicate his identity bracelet so that his clones could enter the different dungeons at the same time. While that happened, they were observed by the guild master Hyosung. He mocked Kang for being in charge of a hunter with an F rank and tried to intimidate our protagonist. But he responded by saying that his guild was a monopolizer of dungeons and on top of that, paid very little to his hunters. When he heard this, the guy got behind him with the intention of attacking him. Luckily, he was stopped by one of his workers. The master retired, hoping to meet the young man again. Later, Young finds himself hunting in the slime field, but this doesn't last long as it's too hard to do it with all the equipment he uses. That's why he lets his clone take care of it and head to the next dungeon. But before that, they pass by the other clone that was in the gym. On the way, Young ponders if he needs any special equipment to hunt, and Kang informs him that he can rent it at the hunting ground, although he should eventually get his own. At the place, they discover that a monstrous breach had occurred. It turns out that the portals from which the monster emerged are disconnected from the outside world, so the hunts only happen when the hunters enter those portals. In some cases, the monsters usually go through the portal, transforming the entire place into a battlefield, which is why they are so called monster breaks. The protagonist rents his equipment, which is quite expensive. With everything ready, the hunt begins and the young man is confident. 3 hours later, he has not managed to catch any rabbit. Tired from his unsuccessful attempt, Young leaves all the work to his clone, promising to send him a message with the number 1 for every rabbit he catches. He then returns home to check his statistics, although he still has a long way to go. After a long time, he falls asleep and receives about 46 messages from his clone, who apparently is doing very well. Kang receives a call from the slime camp manager, who is worried because the clone has been hunting for more than 24 hours, which exceeds the allowed time. Meanwhile, the main character is peacefully waking up until he checks his messages. The CEO was worried about the boy's condition, so he talked to Jeong to make sure the clone would stop hunting in the same way as the other one, who had blocked the road with all the rabbits he had caught. This caught attention of everyone, especially the recruiters from other guilds who stopped inviting him. But since the clone was similar to a robot, he didn't know how to answer them. Just then, the protagonist appeared incognito to give him more ammunition. Everyone around him was surprised that the clone would continue hunting and even decide to record him to discover his technique. Young began to better understand how his clone worked. So far, they had achieved 50% of the stats and could do 50% of the things the main character could do, but without any doubt and with a lot of concentration. At that moment, he was interrupted by Haeyoung, who asked him what he was thinking about. He told her he was a hunter, which surprised her. She asked him if he knew the god of aiming or Ujuzang, and it turned out his clone had become well known on the internet because he hunted more than 200 rabbits. Haeyoung was amazed, but he pretended he didn't know him. Haeyoung also told him that her dream was to be a hunter. In fact, she almost got her license, but she was a little afraid of hunting areas. That's why she asked the young man to accompany her if she got good grades, and he accepted, making a promise to her. After the main character left, the girl was thrilled because she considered going to a dungeon with him would be like a date. She told us that at first she didn't like him because he knew her father, but as she got to know him better, she changed her mind. During the night, Young went to the hunter's ground where a lot of workers were collecting a huge amount of hunted rabbits. Kang informed him that his pay was adjusted to 83%, basically as if he was a Class E hunter. The excitement was interrupted by a hunter who was angry because he was not allowed to hunt rabbits because of the protagonist who took all his targets, so he asked him to give him 10% of what he earned, but when he refused, the guy hit the clone, who exaggerated things when they were recorded by Jeong. This told him that they would only show the hunters if they didn't leave him alone. Later, we discovered that he's part of a rival guild called Hyasun, who have been giving GM's hunters a hard time, causing most of them to leave the guild. Upon hearing this, the main character declares that he won't stand for it and reveals he has a new technique to become stronger faster. The guy is surprised and they agree to meet at the hunter's market, where they sell all kinds of equipment. The protagonist buys a set of armor and weapons for his clones, and also looks for the ability called Familiar, which allows the hunter to share his senses and visions with his pets and summons. Although it costs $1 million, he asks Kangs for an advance of his payments and checks how to use it. The young man then tells Kang that his clones have control of their body superior to his, so he decides to use it to his advantage by sending them to train in the mastery of long and short range weapons. Thanks to the Familiar ability, he can see and feel what his clones do in real time, so he can learn without moving. After an exhausting training session, where clone number 1 demonstrates his combat ability and the other his aim, our protagonist takes a break. At this moment, he meets Hyun, who was studying in the library. They are then spotted by Jeong's guild, who were apparently looking for the protagonist to take revenge. And that's all for today's overview. These 14 chapters are the only ones that have been published so far.